Hi, my name is Jefferson, and I'm a master's student in system dynamics at the University of Bergen. Prior to my system dynamics journey, I was a nonprofit worker in Singapore, where the largely non-professionalized sector continues to face challenges in recruitment as well as retention of workers. So nonprofit often look to hiring passionate individuals willing to endure non-competitive salaries and high workloads. But the problem is passion is a dynamic phenomenon. It changes over time. Passionate individuals like myself may experience burnout and eventually decide to leave the organization altogether. So naturally, for my first system dynamics modeling project, I wanted to understand the dynamics of passion burnout and how to prevent that. Burnout and turnover in tension is nothing new, and it has been studied extensively in social science literature. Scholars have identified several statistically significant predictors, including exhaustion, professional efficacy, insufficient reward and remuneration, and absence of fairness or organizational justice. I believe that system dynamics as a method can complement this literature by producing a simulation model which visually represents the interrelationships of the various factors in causing passion burnout. To that end, I built a preliminary model based on my own subjective experience as a nonprofit worker. And this then serves as the reference mode of behavior for the simulation. So in general, over the course of 12 months, my passion level first increased towards the maximum, overshooting and then collapsing roughly halfway through. As my passion waned, my turnover intention shot up. And 10 months into my job, I was mentally checked out and prepared to leave the organization. So based on my experience, I built a stock and flow diagram to replicate the reference mode. Here, I only present a very simplified model structure showing the key variables and the main loops. So very briefly, the B1 loop here represents the working process. An increase in workload will demand more productive hours in order to remove that increase in workload. And as the worker's productive output increases, their sense of self-efficacy increases, which increases the passion level. As a result, the R3 loop reinforces the gain in passion by motivating the passionate worker to adjust their working hours aggressively to clear any backlog. The R1 loop further strengthens the passion by minimizing any perceived organizational injustice when the passion level is high, and therefore diminishing passion loss. The R2 loop represents the process of job expansion as a response to the worker's efficacy. When the worker is proven to be effective, the organization extracts more from them and expects them to produce even more, thereby increasing their workload level. And these aforementioned loops then are largely responsible for the worker's passion level overshooting. The turning point for passion level is when exhaustion starts setting in. The B2 loop depletes the worker's energy level as they work longer and longer hours, causing a drop in productivity and therefore efficacy. In turn, the passion level drops, and simultaneously, the R4 loop causes the accumulation of workload due to the drop in energy level. So these two loops together, R4 and B2, represent the process of burnout. The B3 and B4 loops contribute to the perceived organizational injustice by the worker to counteract gains in passion. The worker compares their relative workload level as well as their relative performance to the average colleague's output to make a valued judgment about whether or not they were being unjustly exploited. As the perceived injustice increases, the passion level drops. Finally, R8 and B6 loops get activated when the worker's workload level increases beyond the maximum capacity, which leads to negative stress and further accumulates a backlog of workload. Eventually, the organization is forced to reduce the expectations from the burnt out worker, but by then it might be too late as the worker's intention to leave has already been shored up. And now I'll show you the simulation results of this model that I just went through. As you can see, the simulated passion level and turnover intention replicates the reference mode of behavior. Initially, the worker's passion level increases and then overshoots as they experience positive stress or eustress. And this is mainly caused by the exponential increase in perceived professional efficacy and the minimized perceived organizational injustice by way of the causal mechanisms explained earlier. However, with role overload, physical exhaustion sets in and causes the collapse of efficacy. And in turn, the collapse of passion. And the injustice level increases rapidly. As the passion reaches the minimum, the worker is likely to give up trying altogether and dramatically reduce their productive capacity, cruising by as they prepare to leave. Hence, the efficacy level goes into equilibrium below the normal level and prevents the passion level from recovering. To identify leverage points in the system for policy intervention, I conducted scenario analyses. The graphs below here show the results. On the left, this graph shows the effect of increasing the worker's initial salary to match the median salary, as well as the effect of removing changes in the colleague's output, which are really meant to reduce the organizational injustice level. As you can see, the behavior mode fundamentally stays the same. The worker still experiences a collapse in passion level, albeit with a different extent and a rate at which it happens. The graph on the right shows the effect of decreasing the extent to which the worker's job scope is expanded. I call it a control overload, wherein the workload is increased above the normal level, but to a much lower maximum. This time, the problem behavior is resolved. The worker is able to experience an exponential increase in passion levels towards a maximum, and then it goes into steady state equilibrium thereupon. The collapse is prevented since the working hours and workload does not ever increase beyond the capacity limit of the worker. It is clear then that the most effective policy for preventing passion burnout should mitigate the process of role overload. While eustress is encouraged to fuel increase in efficacy and thus passion, organizations must be careful not to overdo it. Otherwise, eustress becomes distress. To prevent this, management must be attuned to the workload level of their employees. Rather than expecting more and more from one or two individuals, organizations should equally depend on all members of its organization to meet its target, such that employees experience a control overload that is well below their maximum capacity. If an even distribution of burden is insufficient to prevent overload, then perhaps it's a good indicator that it's time to increase the headcount. As mentioned, this preliminary model was built based on my own subjective experience, which requires further research. Particularly, the model structure and values could be validated or expanded with data collection from group model building with other nonprofit workers to build a more generalizable model. If so, such a system dynamics model could be a powerful tool, not just for individual organizational learning, but also for policy designed towards prevention of passion burnout and retention of passionate individuals in the nonprofit sector. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening.